Queen Myra walked into the grand throne room of the Talvian Empire with slow, careful steps. She had ruled this vast space empire for 30 years, and in all that time, she had never felt as worried as she did now. The walls of the throne room were tall and white, with lights that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Hundreds of the most important people in the galaxy were gathered here, waiting for her to speak. The governors of star systems sat on one side. Military commanders in their sharp uniforms stood on the other side. Diplomats from friendly alien races waited in the back. All of their eyes were on Queen Myra as she climbed the steps to her throne. All of them expected her to have an answer. All of them expected her to have a plan, but she did not have one yet. 3 months ago, something had appeared at the edge of the Talvian Empire. It was not a ship, it was not a weapon. It was something that scientists did not have a good name for. The people called it the Vex entity because no one could understand what it was or where it came from. It was like a dark cloud made of hungry energy. Wherever it went, stars died. Planets turned to dust. Space itself seemed to bend and break around it. The Talvian Empire had always been the strongest power in the galaxy. For 300 years, no other species dared to challenge them. Their ships were faster and stronger than anything else in space. Their weapons could destroy entire fleets in seconds. Their technology was so advanced that other species seemed almost like children playing with toys. But nothing that the Talvians had tried to do had worked against the Vex entity. General Dai Jung had sent the best warships in the fleet to fight it. The ships had fired their most powerful weapons. The weapons had passed right through the entity as if it were made of nothing at all. Then the Vex entity had simply consumed the ships. 20,000 soldiers had died that day. Nothing had been left of them, not even dust. 2 weeks later, they had tried again with a different plan. This time, they had sent even more ships, with even bigger weapons. 200,000 soldiers had fought that battle. 200,000 soldiers had died. The ships had been destroyed, and the Vex entity had simply moved on to the next star system and begun eating again. Queen Myra was tired. She was afraid, though she tried very hard not to show it. She sat on her throne and looked out at all the important people waiting for her to tell them what to do. "We are gathered here," she said in a strong voice, "because something has changed. For 300 years, the Talvian Empire has been the protector of this galaxy. We have been the strongest. We have been the best. We have never lost a war, and we have never failed to protect our people." She paused. The room was completely quiet. "But we are failing now," she continued, "and we must face this truth. We have sent our best weapons. We have sent our best soldiers. We have sent our best plans. Nothing has worked. The Vex entity continues to grow stronger, and it continues to move closer to our core worlds. Soon it will reach planets where billions of our people live. Soon it will threaten the heart of our empire." General Dai Jung stood up. He was an old man, one of the oldest and most respected warriors the Talvians had ever had. "Your Majesty," he said, "I have served you for 40 years. I have never asked you for anything, but I ask you now. Let us try one more time. Let me take the entire fleet. Let me throw everything we have at this creature. If we all fight together, if we use every weapon, if we sacrifice everything, then perhaps we can—" "We will lose everything and gain nothing," Queen Myra interrupted. She said this gently, but her words were like ice. "I have seen the reports, Dai Jung. I have studied every battle. I have watched the videos. The Vex entity does not fight like any enemy we have ever faced. It does not use weapons. It does not have a strategy. It simply exists. And everything around it dies. Our weapons do not hurt it. Our soldiers do not scare it. Our numbers do not matter to it." The room fell silent again. No one knew what to say. Then the massive doors at the back of the throne room opened. A guard walked in, and behind him came a single man. He was young, perhaps 30 years old. He had dark hair and dark eyes. He wore a simple gray uniform, not fancy and not impressive. Nothing about him seemed special or important or powerful. He was human. The room exploded into noise. Governors stood up. Commanders shouted questions. Diplomats talked quickly to each other. How dare a human be brought into the throne room? How dare a creature from such a young species be allowed in this place of power? The Talvians had known about humans for only 50 years. Humans were primitive. They were weak. They were interesting only because they were so far behind everyone else technologically. Queen Myra stood up and raised her hand. The room became quiet again. She walked down the steps of her throne. Slowly, carefully, she walked toward the human man. Every eye in the room watched her. The human man stood very still. He looked nervous, but he did not run away or look down at his feet. He looked directly at the queen. Queen Myra stopped in front of him. She studied his face for a long moment. Then she raised her hand and pointed directly at him. "Him," she said simply. "We follow his strategy." The room erupted into chaos. No one could believe what they had just heard. The queen, the ruler of the empire, was saying that they would follow the advice of a human from a species that had barely learned to build spaceships? A human who had no military experience, no training, nothing? General Daejong walked toward the queen. "Your Majesty, with respect, this is madness. We cannot—" "I have made my decision," Queen Myra said. She turned and walked back to her throne and sat down again. She looked at the human man. "What is your name?" she asked. "Minho," the man said in a quiet voice. "Minho from Earth." "Minho," the queen repeated. "You will have everything you need. You will have access to all our military information. You will have time to study the situation. And then you will tell us how to win." "And if I fail?" Minho asked. Queen Myra smiled sadly. "Then we fail together, and we fail trying something different. That is all we have left." The guards took Minho away to prepare a room for him. The meeting continued for several more hours. But no one was really listening anymore. Everyone in the room was thinking about what had just happened. Everyone was wondering if their queen had made a terrible mistake, or if she had just saved them all. No one yet understood that Queen Myra's decision would change the entire galaxy forever. Minho was walking through the corridors of the royal palace when he began to understand just how much trouble the Talvian Empire was in. Guards escorted him past empty rooms and past workers who were moving supplies from one place to another. Some of these workers looked scared. Others looked angry. Everyone looked at Minho with suspicion as he passed by them. He had been stationed on the Talvian planet of Talvora for 8 months. His job was simple. He was supposed to be a cultural liaison. This meant he attended parties where important Talvians spoke about trade and politics. It meant he tried to explain Earth customs to curious aliens. It meant he filed reports back to Earth about what he saw and learned. He had thought his time on Talvora would be boring. He had been wrong about many things. The guard stopped at a large room. It was not a prison cell. It was a comfortable chamber with soft lights and furniture designed for human comfort. Minho had never seen this much comfort in his life. The walls showed views of stars and distant planets. There was fresh food on a table, and the food was prepared in a way that humans could actually eat. The Talvians had learned about human biology and had prepared everything perfectly, but comfort did not make Minho feel better. He was terrified. He sat on the edge of a soft bed and tried to breathe slowly. What had just happened? The queen had pointed at him and told an entire empire of billions of people that they would follow his strategy. His strategy. Minho was a scientist and a cultural liaison. He was not a military expert. He had never commanded a ship or an army. He had never studied warfare. He did not know how to fight an enemy that no one could understand. There was a soft knock on the door. Minho's heart jumped. A woman walked in. She was tall and elegant, and Minho recognized her immediately. It was Queen Myra herself. "I hope you are comfortable," the Queen said. She sat down in a chair across from him. "I imagine you are confused." "Yes, Your Majesty," Minho said. "I do not understand why you brought me here. I do not understand why you said you would follow my strategy. I do not have a strategy." Queen Myra smiled slightly. "I know. Not yet. But you will think of one." "How can you be so sure?" Minho asked. The Queen was quiet for a moment. She was looking at something far away, something that only she could see. "Because," she said slowly, "my empire is dying. We have everything. We have the best technology. We have the strongest weapons. We have more ships than I can count. We have fought in hundreds of wars, and we have never lost. But now, we are going to lose to something that we do not understand, and all of our advantages mean nothing." She turned her eyes to Minho. "Your species," she continued, "comes from a poor world. You have very little. Your technology is primitive compared to ours, but you survive anyway. You thrive. You solve problems with creativity instead of with force. 3 weeks ago, I was watching the ambassador's son from Earth. His name was Teo. He was playing a game on a small device. In the game, he was fighting an opponent who was much stronger and much larger than his character. The human character had no weapons. It had no armor. But the human boy defeated the larger opponent anyway, by using tricks and surprises and by thinking in ways that the larger opponent did not expect. Minho listened carefully. He had played many strategy games. He understood what the Queen was saying. "We need that," Queen Myra said. "We need someone who knows how to win when they do not have the most power. We need someone who is not afraid to try something different. We need human thinking." That night, Minho could not sleep. He got up and walked around his room. He requested access to the military databases. The guards outside his door let him out, and they took him to a large chamber filled with computers and screens. A Talvian officer named Jae-sung stayed with him to help him find what he needed. Minho spent the first 12 hours just reading. He read reports about the 2 battles with the Vex entity. He watched videos of the battles. He studied the tactical reports from the commanders who had fought. He looked at data about the entity itself, how fast it moved, how much energy it produced, how it seemed to destroy things. By the morning, his eyes were tired and his head hurt, but he was beginning to see something. The pattern was not obvious. It was hiding in the details. At dawn, Jae-sung brought him food and drink. "You should rest," the Talvian said. "You will not be able to think if you do not sleep." "I cannot sleep yet," Minho said. "I need to understand more." For the next 2 days, Minho studied everything. He asked Jae-sung to explain Talvian military strategies. He asked about the weapons systems. He asked about how the ships were organized and how they communicated with each other. He asked about the Empire's history and all the wars they had fought. He asked about the nature of the Vex entity, what the scientists thought it was, how it seemed to consume energy, why conventional weapons did not work against it. And slowly, a plan began to form in his mind. On the morning of the 3rd day, Minho went to see Queen Myra again. He was tired. His eyes had dark circles under them, but he was not afraid anymore. He understood what needed to be done. "I have a strategy," he told the Queen, "but you will not like it. It will require you to do things that go against everything your empire believes in. It will require you to throw away 300 years of military doctrine. It will require you to use weakness instead of strength." Queen Myra stood up. She was smiling. "Tell me," she said. So Minho told her. He explained about the nature of the Vex entity. He explained how it worked. He explained why the Talvian strategy had failed. And he explained a new way of thinking about the problem. A human way of thinking. When he finished, Queen Myra was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, If this works, Minho, you will have saved not just my empire, but billions of lives across this entire galaxy. We will try your plan. Gather the military commanders. We will explain to them what you have discovered. Minho nodded. He felt hope for the first time since he had arrived on Talvora. It was a small hope, but it was real. Neither of them knew that they were about to change the entire galaxy forever. General Daejung was not convinced. He sat in the military conference room with his arms crossed, listening to a human from a primitive species explain why everything the Talvian Empire had learned about warfare was wrong. He had fought in wars for 50 years. He had commanded millions of soldiers. He had defeated enemies that everyone said were unbeatable. And now, this young human was telling him that he needed to forget everything he knew. Let me understand this correctly, Daejung said slowly. He was trying very hard to keep his voice calm and respectful. You are telling us that the reason our ships were destroyed is because they were too powerful? Not too powerful, Minho said. He was standing in front of a large screen showing diagrams and information about the Vex entity. The problem is that the Vex entity feeds on energy. It draws power from anything with a large energy signature. A Talvian warship produces a huge amount of energy. All of your lights, your weapons, your shields, your engines, they all produce energy. The Vex entity can sense that energy from very far away. It is attracted to it like a moth to a flame. Minho used his hands to show what he meant. When your ships attack, they produce even more energy. The weapons fire produces energy. The shields that defend against the weapons produce energy. You are basically painting a giant target on yourselves and saying, "Come eat us." General Daejung frowned. So you are saying we should not use our weapons? Exactly, Minho said. He clicked the screen, and a new diagram appeared. Or rather, you should use your weapons differently. I have a plan. It is based on something that humans learned a long time ago. We learned that sometimes, when you are weaker than your enemy, you can win by using tricks and surprises. You can win by making your enemy confused. You can win by dividing your enemy's attention. The conference room was full of high-ranking Talvian military officers. There were generals and commanders and tactical experts. All of them were listening carefully. Some looked interested, others looked angry, most looked skeptical. Minho continued explaining. The Vex entity is powerful, but it is not intelligent. It does not think. It just acts on what it senses. If we can make it sense things that are not real, we can confuse it. If we can scatter its attention, we can divide its power. How? Asked Commander Teo. She was younger than Daejung, and she seemed more willing to listen to new ideas. Small ships, Minho said. Hundreds of them. Each one will have a very small energy signature. They will be fast and easy to maneuver. While the Vex entity is confused about where to go, specialized teams will attack its weak points with focused weapons. Weak points? Daejung leaned forward. The creature has not shown any weak points. We have attacked it from every direction. That is because you were attacking with weapons that do not work, Minho said. You were using your standard weapons. The standard weapons are designed to work against ships and structures. But the Vex entity is not a ship. It is not a structure. It is something else entirely. The weapons need to be redesigned. The energy signatures need to match the frequency of the entity itself. Then, when the weapons hit the weak points, they will cause real damage. Minho showed more diagrams. He showed the pattern of energy waves that the Vex entity produced. He showed how the entity was made of multiple connected parts, and how each part had a specific role. He showed how the weapons could be redesigned to attack these parts. This is a theory, Daejung said. You have no proof that this will work. No, Minho agreed. I do not. But your current strategy has failed twice. It has killed 400,000 soldiers. It has failed to stop the entity. My strategy might work, or it might fail. But if it fails, we will have learned something new. And if it succeeds, we will have found a way to save the Empire." For a long time, no one said anything. Then Teo spoke. "I think we should try it. Our current approach is not working. We have nothing to lose by trying something new." Other commanders began to agree. One by one, they started to see the logic in Minho's plan. It went against everything they had been taught. It required them to use their ships in ways that seemed weak and ineffective. But they were desperate, and desperate people are sometimes willing to try things they would normally never consider. Daijong was the last to agree. He stood up and walked to the screen where Minho was showing the diagrams. He studied the images carefully for a long time. Then he turned to Minho. "I have spent 50 years learning how to use force and power and overwhelming numbers to defeat my enemies," the old general said. "You are asking me to use the opposite approach. You are asking me to use division and confusion and small specialized teams. In every war I have fought, this approach would have failed. But you are right about one thing. Our current approach is already failing, and I would rather fail trying something different than fail doing the same thing over and over again." He extended his hand to Minho. In Talvian culture, this was a gesture of respect and agreement. Minho took his hand, and Daijong gripped it firmly. "Then we will try your way, human," Daijong said. "But understand this. If your plan fails, if more people die, the responsibility is yours." "I understand," Minho said, "and I accept that responsibility." The next week was the busiest week of Minho's life. Military engineers and weapons designers worked with him to create new weapons. Ship designers helped him create smaller, faster vessels that could carry the new weapons. Tactical officers helped him create complex battle plans that required perfect timing and perfect communication between hundreds of different ships. Everything had to be just right. If even one ship was in the wrong place at the wrong time, the plan could fail. Minho worked almost without sleep. He ate when someone put food in front of him. He drank water when he remembered to. He spent his time looking at screens and making notes and explaining his ideas to officers who did not always understand them. But slowly, the plan came together. The new ships were built. They were small and sleek and fast. They looked nothing like traditional Talvian warships. They did not have the same weapons. They did not have the same armor. They did not have the same power and strength that Talvian ships were famous for. But they had something else. They had potential. They had a chance. Queen Myra watched the progress every day. She came to the command center where Minho was working, and she saw the plans taking shape. She saw the new ships being tested. She saw the weapons being refined. "Do you still believe in this plan?" she asked Minho one night when no one else was around. "No," Minho said honestly. "But I believe that we have to try something, and this is the best idea I have." Queen Myra smiled. "That is good enough," she said. 2 weeks later, the Vex entity crossed into the Talvora system. It had consumed 3 outer colonies and killed millions of people. It was moving toward the inner planets, toward the worlds where billions of Talvians lived. The new fleet was ready. The plan was ready. Minho was ready. It was time to see if human thinking could save an empire. The command center was a place of perfect quiet. Hundreds of officers sat at their stations, monitoring information about the battle that was about to happen. The information came from sensors across the entire Talvora system. The information showed the position of every ship, the status of every weapon, the location of the Vex entity. Minho stood at the center of the command center, with General Daejung on one side and Queen Myra on the other side. They looked at screens that showed the entire galaxy in miniature. The Vex entity appeared as a dark red sphere, moving steadily toward the center of the system. The Talvian fleet appeared as hundreds of small blue lights spread out across a huge area of space. "All ships are in position," said Captain Jiwoo, who was in charge of coordinating the entire fleet. She spoke into a communication device that allowed her to talk to every ship at the same time. "All weapons are charged. All crews are ready. Awaiting final command." Min-ho looked at General Dae-jung. Dae-jung looked at Queen Myra. Queen Myra gave a small nod. "Begin the operation," Dae-jung said. Immediately the battle began. The small Talvian ships activated their false energy signatures. Holographic projectors scattered across the Talvora system began to create images of massive, powerful Talvian warships. The images looked real. They had energy signatures. They had weapons. They looked exactly like the ships that had attacked the Vex entity before. But they were not real. They were tricks. They were illusions created by human ingenuity and Talvian technology working together. The Vex entity sensed the energy from these false ships. Its dark red shape began to move toward the nearest false signature. It moved quickly, hungry, ready to consume. But as soon as it moved toward one false signature, that signature disappeared. Another false signature appeared somewhere else, and the entity changed direction. Another, and another, and another. The false signatures flickered across the system like games. Like the Vex entity was playing a game it could not understand and could not win. On the screens in the command center, Min-ho could see the confusion spreading through the Vex entity. Its movements became jerky and unpredictable. It changed direction over and over again. It was trying to find something real to consume, but everything it found was nothing. Everything it reached for was empty space. "The entity is separated," reported Commander Teo from her station. "The core is isolated from the smaller fragments." "Now," Min-ho said quietly. The real attack began. The small Talvian ships that had been hidden in the outer edges of the system suddenly came alive. They approached the Vex entity from multiple directions at once, but they did not fire standard weapons. They fired the new weapons that the engineers had designed based on Min-ho's plan. The new weapons produced energy signatures that matched the frequency of the Vex entity itself. When the weapons hit the entity, something happened that had never happened before. The weapons did damage. Real damage. The entity shrieked, a sound that echoed across multiple communication frequencies, a sound of something genuinely hurt. Min-ho watched the screens. He saw the energy ripple through the Vex entity as the weapons struck. He saw the entity convulse. He saw it try to pull itself together. But the attack continued. From every direction, the small ships fired. They moved in perfect coordination, hitting the same weak points over and over again. The entity writhed and twisted, trying to defend itself, trying to escape. But there were too many ships attacking from too many directions. The battle lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of constant, perfect attacks. 4 hours of the Vex entity being slowly, systematically destroyed. And then, it was over. The entity pulled itself together. What was left of it, perhaps half of what it had been before, began to move away from the Talvora system. The small Talvian ships did not chase it. There was no need. The entity was defeated. It was running. The command center erupted in celebration. Officers stood up from their stations and shouted with joy. Some of them were crying. Some of them were laughing. They had won. Against something that seemed impossible to defeat, they had won. General Dae-jung gripped Min-ho's shoulder. The old general's eyes were bright with emotion. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." Queen Myra was calm, but Min-ho could see the relief in her eyes. "Casualties?" she asked. Captain Ji-woo checked the information. "Minimal. 23 ships were lost. Estimated 150 casualties total, far fewer than we expected." 150 deaths. 150 people who had died. In any other context, this would have been a tragedy. But compared to the 400,000 who had died in the previous 2 battles, it was a miracle. News of the victory spread quickly across the Talvian Empire. But not everyone was happy. In fact, many people were very unhappy. Political factions began to form. There were those who believed that the battle had been won because of Minho's human strategy and that this proved humans deserved respect. And there were those who believed that the real victory had come from Talvian strength and technology and that Minho had simply gotten lucky. There were conspiracy theories. Some people said that Minho had somehow created the Vex entity himself and that he was controlling it, and that the battle was all a trick to make himself look good. Others said that Minho had sabotaged the first two battles so that the Queen would be desperate enough to listen to him. Reports came to Minho about these theories. He read them and felt sad. He had not expected to be hated for saving lives. But Queen Myra was not worried about the conspiracy theories. She knew the truth. She had been in the command center. She had seen the victory with her own eyes. People fear what they do not understand, she told Minho. Your way of thinking is different from theirs. Different is always scary to people, but they will learn. They will see that your strategy works. They will learn to respect humans. This takes time, but it will happen. Over the next 3 months, the Vex entity was tracked as it moved away from the Talvora system. The Talvian fleet engaged it 3 more times, each time using variations of Minho's strategy. Each time, the entity was weakened further. Each time, the damage to the Talvian fleet was minimal. Slowly, the entity grew smaller and weaker. Slowly, it became less of a threat. And slowly, the truth about what had really happened began to spread across the Talvian Empire. People began to understand that it was not luck, it was not trickery. It was a better way of thinking. It was human thinking. Scientists began to study Minho's strategy. Military officers began to write papers about it. Educational institutions began to teach about it. The human approach to problem-solving, using creativity instead of force, using division instead of overwhelming power, using adaptation instead of tradition, began to become respected. Something was changing in the Talvian civilization. Something fundamental. And it had all started with one human man pointing at a diagram and saying, "What if we tried something different?" 5 years had passed since the first victory over the Vex entity. The entity itself had been completely destroyed 6 months ago, after being weakened by repeated attacks using Minho's strategy. The galaxy was safe. The Talvian Empire was safe. Billions of lives had been saved. But something else had happened as well. Something that might have been even more important than the military victory. The way that the Talvian civilization thought about itself was changing. The way that other species in the galaxy thought about Talvians was changing. Most importantly, the way that everyone thought about humans was changing. Minho stood in a large conference hall on Earth, the planet where he had been born 35 years earlier. The hall was filled with people from a dozen different species. There were Talvians with their elegant features and formal bearing. There were Krell, who were shorter and stockier with thick gray skin. There were Xenians, who seemed to be made of crystalline structures that reflected light in beautiful ways. And there were humans, from every nation on Earth, all gathered together for this special day. Minho was nervous, but he tried not to show it. He was about to give a speech to the entire United Earth government and to representatives from every major spacefaring species in the galaxy. It was perhaps the most important moment of his life, except for the moment when Queen Myra had pointed at him in the throne room. "My friends," Minho began. His voice carried through the hall and was translated into a dozen different languages by the devices that everyone wore. "I stand before you today to talk about something that happened 5 years ago. But I do not want to talk about the battle. I do not want to talk about winning a military victory. I want to talk about something much more important than that. I want to talk about what that victory taught us." He paused and looked out at the faces watching him. Some were friendly, some were skeptical. Some were curious. 5 years ago, Minho continued, The Talvian Empire faced an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. They had the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. They had the most advanced technology. They had hundreds of thousands of soldiers and millions of ships, but their weapons did not work. Their technology was useless. Their numbers meant nothing, and they were about to lose everything. Minho walked across the stage. "Why?" he asked. "Why did all of their power and all of their technology mean nothing? Because they were thinking about the problem in only one way. They were thinking like conquerors. They had always won through overwhelming force, and they could not imagine any other way to win. They could not imagine that sometimes you have to be creative. Sometimes you have to use tricks. Sometimes you have to think like someone who does not have overwhelming force. You have to think like a human." Someone in the audience laughed. Others smiled. "At that time," Minho said, "humans were considered primitive. We were considered weak. We had only recently learned to travel to other planets. Our technology was far behind everyone else. But we had something that the Talvians did not have. We had experience with being weak. We had experience with having limited resources. We had learned to survive and to thrive even when we did not have the most power." The Talvian ambassador stood up. His name was Jae Sung, and he was a different Jae Sung than the officer who had helped Minho study the military databases 5 years ago. "That is true," Jae Sung said. "We have learned that. And we are grateful to humanity for teaching us." "But," Minho said, "it was not really about humans being better than Talvians. It was about diversity of thinking. It was about the fact that when you bring different ways of thinking together, you can solve problems that seem impossible. One species alone might not be able to do it, but many species thinking together, that is when miracles happen." Over the next hour, Minho explained how the victory over the Vex entity had led to completely new ways of thinking about problem-solving across the galaxy. Talvian military academies were teaching asymmetrical adaptive warfare. Scientists from every species were working together on joint research projects. Schools were teaching young people about different ways of approaching problems. In some places, humans were being brought in specifically to help with projects that seemed stuck or unsolvable. It was not that humans were suddenly considered superior. It was that humans were now considered valuable partners. Human creativity and adaptability and willingness to try new things were recognized as important gifts that could help solve problems that pure technology could not solve. 5 years ago, Minho said near the end of his speech, a queen chose to listen to someone from a supposedly inferior species. That choice changed everything. It changed the military situation. It changed the political situation. And most importantly, it changed the way that intelligent beings in this galaxy think about cooperation and diversity. He paused and looked at Queen Myra, who was sitting in the front row of the audience. She was smiling. "I believe," Minho continued, "that this is the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. An era where all species, no matter how advanced or how primitive, can contribute to solving the great problems we face. An era where strength comes not from how many weapons you have or how advanced your technology is, but from how open you are to new ways of thinking. An era where diversity is recognized as our greatest strength." The hall erupted in applause. Some of the applause seemed genuine and heartfelt. Some seemed more polite and formal, but everyone was clapping. Everyone was showing respect for what Minho had said. That night, there was a celebration. People from different species mingled and talked. They ate food from different worlds. They shared stories and ideas. Minho moved from conversation to conversation, but he felt tired. He had given so many speeches over the past 5 years. He had done so many interviews. He had become famous across the entire galaxy. But fame made him uncomfortable. He had never wanted to be famous. He had just wanted to solve a problem. A young Talvian approached him. She had bright, intelligent eyes, and she introduced herself as Jiwoo. "I am named after the captain who coordinated the fleet during the first battle," she said. "I was born right after the victory. My parents named me in honor of that captain because they said Captain Jiwoo represented something important about the future. They said that she represented Talvians and humans working together." "That is beautiful," Minho said. "I have something to tell you," Jiwoo said. She moved closer so that no one else would hear. "The Queen is stepping down next year. She is retiring from power. There will be a new council to lead the empire, and the new council will include 3 human representatives. For the first time in history, humans will have an official voice in the highest levels of Talvian government." Minho felt his eyes widen. That is huge," he said. "It is because of you," Jiwoo said. "Because you showed that humans have value. Because you showed that different ways of thinking can solve impossible problems. You have changed the galaxy, Minho. You have changed the future." Minho did not know what to say. He had never set out to change the galaxy. He had just been trying to survive. He had been trying to help people stay alive, and somehow that had led to all of this. He looked around the celebration. He saw Talvians talking to Krell. He saw humans discussing philosophy with Xenians. He saw species that had never communicated before now exchanging ideas and information, and he understood that Jiwoo was right. Everything was changing. The entire future of the galaxy was being shaped right now, in this moment, because people were willing to think differently and willing to listen to new ideas. The old universe, where one empire dominated everything else, was dying. A new universe was being born, a universe where cooperation mattered more than domination, where creativity mattered more than force, where every species, no matter how young or how primitive, had something valuable to contribute. Minho thought about that moment 5 years ago in the throne room when Queen Myra had pointed at him. He thought about how frightened he had been. He thought about how impossible the challenge had seemed. He thought about how he had almost failed so many times. But he had not failed. And the galaxy was better because of that. Billions of people were alive because a queen had made one simple choice, one choice to listen, one choice to think differently, one choice to point at a human and say, "Let us try his way." If that was not a miracle, Minho did not know what was.